Good evening and welcome to the Modise Network. Tonight, DA Federal Leader Mmusi Maimane joins us on the couch as we take a deeper look into the party. From their handling of the Cape Town drought, the supposed racial tensions within the party, and the party's contribution to South Africa's public life. Maimane will also answer your questions as the youth on how the party plans to address issues of unemployment, race, the economy, and many more. I'm Tim Modise, and thank you for joining me this evening. The Democratic Alliance is the second biggest party in the country with 22.23% support in the last national election. The party runs one province, the Western Cape, and governs 4 major metros in South Africa, plus other municipalities. But having said that, they seem to be having a serious image problem with allegations of corruption and racial infighting. They've been labeled a white minority-supported party that is anti-transformation, and this has led to even personal attacks on its leader, Mmusi Maimane, who is joining us to talk about these and other issues that the party is currently grappling with. And Mmusi, pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much,
our program tonight. And I said, I want to start right there with the question of the attacks that you come under at a personal level, where you are referred to as a fronting person, as a stooge, as a puppet of white monopoly capital, that actually DA belongs to white people. You've got no business leading this party. How do you feel about these attacks?
I think it tells you a lot about our history, Tim. Our history is one where we had racial superiority and inferiority, and it's bequeathed to us a sense upon which people sometimes assume power to one race and not to another. But in truth, it's a struggle I'm fighting. In truth, when I look at South Africa, my project is not to replace one race with another. My project is to build one South Africa for all, upon which black South Africans and white South Africans and Indian and colored South Africans can work together towards the prosperity of all people. And within that project requires us to always put at the front that says what unites us, what brings us together is values. It's about what we're pursuing as a society. And that's a focus. So ultimately, there are people who become cynical about that. There are others who become very sycophant about it. But at the end of the day, it's important for South Africa, because if we don't get it right, if the DA doesn't get it right, we will end up with a recycling of our history where one race dominates another. We'll end up with, if not another form of colonization, another form of nationalism. We've got to find ourselves today in a society upon which each individual has the right to associate with whoever and build a South Africa for all. That's my project.
But now, as a way of making a case or justifying the argument, right, as horrible and terrible, personal as the criticisms may be, people say, the problem with the DA is that he does not want to acknowledge the injustices of the past. And you are picking up from where we are now and saying, let's continue and hope for the best going forward.
There's no greater absurdity in that statement. The history of the organization, let's begin perhaps maybe with Helen Suzman. Pre-1994, here was a Jewish South African woman, stood in parliament, opposed apartheid. Chief Albert Luthuli writes so comprehensively about how here was a woman who came to fight for the rights of prisoners, black prisoners, who they were in prison, she was free, yet she knew that she should fight that case, so that freedom must be for all. Post-1994, this was a party that says we stand for certain principles and values. When I was elected as leader of the DA, in the constitution of the party were values of freedom, fairness, and opportunity. The idea that society is inherently unfair. Today, as a function of our history, but as a function of the last, equally as much as well as the last number of years, we've seen inequality continue. We still see today that much of the spatial network, the apartheid spatial network, is still in place. The party stands at the forefront of saying it is fundamentally unfair. Let us do whatever we can to address that injustice and build a South Africa for all. And so I think often our critics want to say, for us to address a historical injustice is to enslave one race at the prospect of liberating another. My view is to say no. Actually, the prospect of complete freedom is about to bring all South Africans together, to accept that society is unfair. The people who are still left out are majority black South Africans, women, and South Africans who are living in rural communities. And ultimately what we've got to say is, all of us, how do we work hard to address that injustice? It's a historical injustice, but furthermore, the best way to also address it is to look at the future. It was our shared future. Let's talk about the fact that our kids are not educated. Let's talk about the fact that our kids are still getting the worst education, a bad education that we can find. Let's address that. Let's talk about jobs. Let's talk about the safety of our citizens. Because once you start to address the future, you then equally so invest in addressing a historical injustice. So it's not either or.
Well, in recent times now, with the debate of land expropriation without compensation being foremost, and it looks like it's going to be the dominant feature of the forthcoming elections, that I've had people say, you know, they think the DA's message is complicated or confused or it's not coherent, it's not clear. They don't understand what the DA stands for, and you'll never hear Mmusi say anything about land. We want land. If Mmusi can promise land, then he'll be talking.
Our message is simple, actually. It's the simplest of the lot. It says, let you, Modise, or that family, you must own the land in your own right. Other parties are saying, let it belong to the state. We're saying, let the South Africans own it themselves. That's the first. The second is, actually, let's not worry about changing the constitution. It already empowers us to achieve land reform and land restitution. We actually give value when we talk about creating work and sustainability for our people. Is we're the ones who are saying, in farming communities, let us ensure that the people who work on the farm actually can have ownership in that farm. Because when they are the ones, they know what it is. Rather than practicing corruption where we call a politician elsewhere and say, come own it. No, we're saying, let the people own it in their rights. Because my interest, Tim, is that land is a justice conversation, but it's also an economic conversation. And our economy requires that citizens can own so they can create wealth and prosperity for themselves. That's the goal. You know, in Dobsonville, my parents could not own their house because it belonged to the state. So they were given a permit to stay there. Why do we want to go back there and say, let the state own it some more? Let's make sure citizens can own it. That's why, even in where we are in government, we've been issuing out more title deeds comparative to any other administration. When we are even in the Western Cape, we've adopted a place where farm workers can work and own so that they can transfer wealth. And I'm saying the long-term future of our country is if we can invest in that, we can ensure that ultimately generations can transfer wealth from one generation to another so that our kids can have a better tomorrow.
I will come back to this question later on in the program, but I want to, for now, talk about the problems within the organization. As I said at the beginning of this conversation, that there's a view that Mmusi Maimane has lost control of the party. Look at how the organization is handling the De Lille matter. It's now before the courts with no possibility of resolution. Do you think that the leadership of the DA, under your guidance, has failed in managing this problem of, for lack of a word, ousting Patricia de Lille, because that's the ultimate intention anyway?
But Tim, I think we must understand what is the problem. When you inherit governments, take over a government, you take that job absolutely seriously. South Africa is beset with levels of corruption all across the country. When someone comes to you and says there's an allegation here of corruption, and then you get evidence that says to you someone interfered in the running of by appointing somebody in a manner that's not proper. Someone says to you that ultimately there are two reports, one is from Bowman and the other is from the Auditor General, that raise concerns. What do you do as a leader? You say, let's attend to the problem. Let us deal with it, because ultimately everybody, doesn't matter who you are, must be held accountable. I'm proud of the fact that the DA takes that standard and it says, That is the gold bar standard we want. We don't want a process where we say, okay, maybe this will embarrass, it will suddenly make us look bad and how, so let's hide it, let's not deal with it, which happens a lot, by the way. We hold different standards. I think our people are tired of politicians who don't take accountability. They ask us to hold people account. We've taken a decision, and it's tough.
Yeah.
But the resolution now will say, what are you trying to achieve? You are trying to effect accountability. Now it'll end up in court. It is in court. The courts will give us a resolution on that matter. I am convinced, as I sit here, that there are some genuine challenges that require accountability, and I must never shy away from that.
But now, has the DA taken such action against any city mayor or councillor anywhere in the country? Because the view broadly held is that you are targeting Patricia de Lille simply because she happens to be coming from the colored community, for instance, or has got a different political pedigree, political background.
And this is where the real nub of the challenge is, actually. We've probably in the past fired sufficient white mayors. People have not said we're targeting them as their white mayors. It's almost as though that's taken for granted. When you take somebody, then we must say, let's deal with race as the first problem. No, let's deal with accountability that must apply to all citizens. So it's not the first time we've taken action against anybody, because we pride ourselves at saying, if there are challenges, if something is wrong, accountability must be effected. I think our people must always trust us to do what is in their interests, and their interest is that no political principle must ever be able to get away with it. Because tomorrow, another political party inherits power, and they hide things. I mean, even now, if you think about in KwaZulu-Natal, the ANC is singing a song saying, "When Zenu Zuma," what has Zuma done? Because he doesn't know, and no one is going to hold him accountable. And what we're saying is no, actually no. Doesn't matter what race, doesn't matter where you come from. When you stand up as a public servant, you are accountable to the people. And we, as the custodians of your vote, must ensure that we do with it accountability as best as we can. So I'm of the complete view that we will always take accountability as a value and as a principle, because our country has had a history of no accountability. We must effect it.
Mmusi Maimane is the leader of the DA. He's talking to us on the program. You can also join our conversation, and let's have it on Twitter at #Modise Network. He's still going to address other issues as we continue with our conversation.